Wrapping up World War II. Part that it has all come down to, we have Hitler now dead. The Soviet Union is in Germany, pushing in on Berlin. The Americans are pushing in from the west, Pacific. All that is left to do is go in and take Japan. So now we are going to wrap up all this fighting that has taken place. So Germany is going to surrender on May 8th, 1945. That happens to be President Truman's birthday as well. But Germany is going to surrender that day, leaving Japan as the last Axis member. Okay, and the Allies realized that, a couple things here, and this actually isn't in the notes, but one thing they realized is they're going to have to help rebuild Germany and the rest of Europe and make sure that this is done correctly this go around, as opposed to last time where they just severely punished Germany and got nothing done. But they also realized in order for the war to officially wrap up, they are going to have to invade Japan. The estimates by the experts on this said that 1 million Americans would die in an assault on Japan. 500,000 British people would die as a result as well. Soviet Union could lose more soldiers because the Soviet Union officially declared war on Japan in order to make this happen. And the Japanese could lose 3 million soldiers and citizens. So a tremendous loss of life. And this is the decision that President Truman is now facing down on how to actually get into Japan and commit this assault and make sure that the war itself wraps up. So, as the summer of 1945 goes on and preparations are underway for this assault on Japan, at Potsdam, where they're having a meeting to discuss how to rebuild Germany, it is decided a couple things. One, they're going to split Germany into 4 different quadrants, and they would have each country have a regulatory role in rebuilding that part of Germany, and they also decided to split the capital of Berlin into 4 parts, and each country would have a role in rebuilding that part of Berlin. Okay, so that's going to not go very well, and we'll talk more about that and how it started the Cold War later on. However, on July 25th, 1945, Truman writes in his diary that he had mentioned to Stalin about this new weapon that had been tested on July 16th, and the test was successful. You can see a picture of that weapon being detonated on the right-hand side of the screen. That is at Los Alamos, whenever the first atomic bomb was detonated, and the explosion captured on film. Okay, so we knew that this would be successful. We had 2 more bombs ready to go, and we now knew, we could use these on Japan, but we will see if we can get them to surrender first. Okay, now, also of note, Winston Churchill of Britain is replaced as the Prime Minister because his party loses the majority of Parliament at that point in time in Britain, and he is replaced. Okay, so that leadership role goes to a new member, and I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, and that's very poor of me, but I apologize. But you now have 2 of the big 3 replaced, and Stalin is the only original member of the big 3. And he felt that he should have more of a say in how this punishment for Germany should go, and how rebuilding of Europe should go, since he was the last one remaining, as well as the fact that the Soviet Union had lost so many people. Okay, it is decided that instead of just going in and dropping these 2 weapons we have ready to go on Japan, that we will send a very strongly worded statement to Japan, litter their cities with massive amounts of leaflets, and say, here's what's going to happen to you if you all refuse to surrender. Okay, and this largely is dismissed. Okay, and I believe those pamphlets specifically said surrender or face destruction. Okay, which the people of Japan were going, you can't destroy us too much more because of what you did to Tokyo. Okay, in a 2-day fire raid in which they used red phosphorus bombs or white phosphorus bombs over Tokyo that went up in burning basically multiple parts of the cities to the ground. 250,000 buildings were destroyed and about 80,000 people were killed. Those are similar numbers as to what's going to happen with the atomic bombs that are going to be dropped. However, the 80,000 killed and 250,000 destroyed, like I said, that was 2 days of constant bombing. We're talking about 1 bomb with the other ones. Okay, so Japan and the Prime Minister Hideki Tojo are going to refuse to surrender, despite being warned that they faced severe destruction for refusing to surrender. Okay, they had no knowledge that the bombings were going to be as bad as they were. They had no knowledge that we had this type of weapon. But what is going to happen? Whenever the Japanese refuse to surrender, President Truman is faced with a decision. Should he hold on to these two weapons and allow the U.S. servicemen who have been training for an assault on Japan to begin an invasion, or should he use one of the weapons, kill a lot of men, women, and children who had no ties to the Japanese military, and also destroy a city in the process of? Okay, and Truman wrestled with this decision for several days until one of his closest advisors said, "Sir, if you don't do this, whenever I'm sitting at your impeachment proceedings here in a couple of years, I will say you had knowledge to end the war without killing 1 million American soldiers and 3 million Japanese, but you did not do it." And Truman takes that information to heart and he says, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the right decision. It's not one I'm going to take lightly, but this decision to save American lives is one that I've got to take. So, on August 6, 1945, city of Hiroshima, within Japan, which is largely left untouched by bombings by the United States up to this point in time, is hit by a single nuclear weapon that exploded just above the city. The entire city is completely destroyed. There are 70,000 killed by the initial blast instantly, and another 110,000 who were, who were injured, and several of those people died from radiation-related illnesses later. There are still survivors of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Whenever I talk about that as well, but the stories they have just basically talk about how horrific the bombing was. It is literally everything that was around of strong significance was gone. The injuries that you saw here as a result of exposure to radiation was unlike any other injuries they had seen before. You'll see here on the next page some of the various things that happened as a result of this. So let me just walk you through these photos really quick. The atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was nicknamed Little Boy in honor of Franklin Roosevelt. But anyway, it is a bomb that was shaped mostly like this. I believe it was a uranium bomb that they dropped over the city of Hiroshima. It was dropped out of a plane called the Enola Gay, which was commanded by a Colonel Paul Tibbets, who named the plane after his mother. But he flew this plane across Hiroshima and dropped the weapon out of there. They had just enough time to get out before the blast and turn around to see a brilliant flash of light behind them. But anyway, that was dropped out of a single bomber, and one single bomb destroyed this entire city, whereas other weapons to cause this magnitude of damage, it would have taken multiple bombers multiple days to do this. Okay, here you can see a burn victim as a result of this bombing. She was wearing a patterned shirt. Then the flash from the blast actually burned into her skin. Some people were instantly just vaporized as a result of this bombing. This structure right here still stands in Hiroshima as a memorial to those who perished in the bombing. But as you can see here, everything, it's not just like a tornado where everything is destroyed and flattened, it is also burned. Okay, so anyway, this happens in Hiroshima. And later on that day, after the bombing, people are trying to make phone calls into Hiroshima and they are unable to do so. A pilot is sent over the city to see what is going on. They figured they'd had a bombing run over there, and that's why nobody was answering the phones. And he reported back to Tokyo that the entire city was gone. And they found this very hard to believe because the city had been untouched. But then they came to find out that this was caused by a single weapon. Okay, so moving on from there. Japan was issued one more warning to surrender. Otherwise, they would face further destruction. This was ignored by Hideki Tojo. I'm not exactly sure on his reasoning of this. It may have been that he did not know the United States had another weapon ready to go. So, a couple of days after the initial bombing of Hiroshima, a plutonium bomb, which is just a different atom that is, or different element that has been enriched and atoms split on it, is dropped over the city of Nagasaki. That one killed 60,000 or more, wound up wounding several hundred thousand as well, and Nagasaki itself was a manufacturing center that had been largely untouched as a result of other U.S. bombings. Okay, now, a little backstory on Nagasaki whenever it got bombed. One of the men who was going to be making that assault on Japan was my grandmother's cousin, the same one that I talked about that guarded the code talker. He was going to be involved in making this run on Japan. And basically, what it came down to, he was a very educated man. Matter of fact, wound up becoming a superintendent of the Los Angeles, California school district, as well as a professor of education at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He said, it was what it came down to was, do we knew what the death toll was going to be for both sides. Do we limit the death toll for the Americans and put it on one side, or do we just go ahead and say, these weapons should never be used, and we have a higher death toll? Well, he ultimately said and agreed with Truman that the decision was right to drop the bomb. Okay, so, and I don't give my opinion on it, but I'm just telling you the kind of the mindset these other people did. But anyway, after the bombing of Nagasaki, Hideki Tojo is overridden by Emperor Hirohito, who says that Japan will be surrendering, and he does so on August 19th, 1945. I believe there was a mass fear throughout Japan at that point in time that another bomb was ready to go and be dropped on them. But the United States did not have another bomb ready to go, and it would have taken several months in order to get one ready to go. The formal surrender of Japan was achieved on September 2nd, 1945, officially ending the war in Japan, or the war in the Pacific, to join a VE Day, which is May 8th, 1945. VJ Day took place on September 2nd, 1945. And some very famous pictures came out of that. Here you can see Emperor Hirohito surrendering to Douglas MacArthur on the deck of the USS Missouri, signing paperwork that officially ended the war. This is not the peace treaty. This is more of the armistice that ended the war over there. Over here you have the very famous kiss in Times Square that took place between a sailor and a nurse after the war had been declared ended. So anyway, lots of celebration took place on that day. And as a result of that, now the punishments are going to be handed out, and there is going to be some punishment for this, but the rebuilding is going to also begin. And I should mention this about Hirohito before I go on to too far here. He was placed on trial, but Hirohito was actually left on the throne as Emperor of Japan. He was mostly powerless until the end of his life. And Hirohito actually remained on the throne of Japan until 1989, whenever he passed away. But results of the war. This is how World War II ultimately impacts your life. Up until World War II, we were seen as a wealthy nation, but we were not considered to be like the end-all, be-all superpower of the world. Okay, other nations held this distinction. It was usually Germany or Italy or even Britain. Now, as a result of World War II, the United States is considered to be the world superpower, and a second one is going to emerge from the Soviet Union. That's going to set us up for the Cold War. As a result of us being the superpower, we now commit troops to several conflicts to protect our allies, and we now have bases around the world as opposed to just having bases here in the United States. Okay, so our military bases overseas. If you join the military, some of you might be headed down that route. Chances are, if you get deployed someplace, you're going to be put over at a base. Could be anywhere from Korea to Germany to Britain. Okay, so we'll talk more about that later on. There were several war criminals that also took or had their trials done during this, and they were excuse me. They faced punishments for the various crimes they committed during the war. Several of them, Nazis in Nuremberg, are hanged for their participation in the Holocaust. However, Tojo himself was given a trial and faced a certain death as a result of execution. Instead, chose to commit suicide. Okay, they saw that as more honorable than somebody else killing them. Soldiers return home, and as soldiers return home, there is going to be an entire generation of children born known as the baby boomers. Okay, and as soon as the war is over and these men return home, 76 million people are going to be born within the next 15 years. Okay, that is the generation that my parents are both part of. But the United States realized, as a result of this, like I said before, why this is relevant to you all. We've got to remain involved in world politics. We're going to join the United Nations in order to promote peace, which also means that we're going to have to stare down several conflicts as a result. Okay, and these conflicts still impact things that you have in your life. Other ways this impacts your life, the use of nuclear weapons. We are now a nuclear society. We face the threat of nuclear weapons, and we also have the capabilities to use nuclear weapons. Another thing that might stick out to you is the various amounts of technology that come out of this in terms of communications technology, such as phones that are able to be used without a landline directly, radios, things of that sort. Television also gets perfected as a result of this, and as well as vehicles and various other things. The other thing that's going to impact you all, besides if your grandparents, more than likely your grandparents or great-grandparents are part of the baby boomer generation, the other thing that's going to impact you all is we're going to split Germany into 4 military districts. France is going to get one, United States another, Britain another, and the Soviet Union another one. Eventually, we're going to band together the ones of Britain, France, and the United States because we have very similar governments, and then we're going to be up against the one from the Soviet Union. Germany is actually going to split into 2 countries as a result of this, and the Cold War is going to ensue because of this, which is what we will be talking about here in the next couple of weeks. So, I know that is quite a bit of information on World War II, but like I said, you could take entire college classes, semesters long, that don't even cover everything there is to cover on World War II. You could take a semester-long class on the Pacific, not get all the information you need out of that, another one on the war in Europe, one on the home front, just so many resources from this because everything was so well documented. So I'll go through a few of the highlights of those books and films that came out as a result of World War II, and we'll talk about that in the closing part of the week. So other than that, that is World War II. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Hopefully I've shown you why this still plays a huge role in our society, other than the sheer magnitude of how many people were in it. But it also still generates a lot of revenue for filmmakers, book writers, and historians alike because there's just so much information to go over and so many stories to tell. So have a good rest of the week.